Welcome to another Immigration Art video. I'm Art Serratelli. We, as an immigration law group, handle cases all over the United States. Immigration law is a federal law, and the immigration law is the same everywhere. So if you have any questions about anything, we are a full-service immigration law group. If you've got a question, we've got an answer. If you're acquainted with the Immigration Art video channel on YouTube, you'll know that I have a previous video describing how you should answer the question regarding your immigration status on a job application so that you increase your chances of getting the interview. If you get the interview, then they're going to ask again. They're going to ask again about your immigration status. I mean, they might not, but they may. Here's my opinion about how to handle immigration questions that you could be asked during a job interview. It could be at a job fair. It could be at the initial screening interview on a college campus. It could be the initial interview in an office. Or perhaps it's a callback interview. Perhaps it's a second interview. But the point is, you've answered the job application. You've checked the proper boxes regarding immigration status on the job application. Check out the other video. And then now they love your credentials, they love your resume, and they've called you in for an interview. What do you need to know before you walk through the interview door? The recruiters and the career offices and the students I've spoken with on campus throughout these many years of my career, here's the feedback I'm getting. The first thing to remember is, please, the first words out of your mouth should not be, do you sponsor? Do you sponsor for work visa? I need H-1B, and then I will need an EB-3 or EB-2 based green card. No. That kind of approach where the first word, remember, an interview is like a first date. You will not ask your significant other on the first date if they want to get married before the waiter even brings the menu. So please don't be asking a prospective employer, the first thing out of your mouth is, do you sponsor? No, don't do that. Here's another thing that employers and career offices have told me. They sometimes believe that if you talk about immigration and sponsorship for immigration benefits too often in an interview, they feel like you have no interest in the company. This is how they think. They think that you only want the job with them for the H-1B or the green card, for the sponsorship. They believe if you talk too much about sponsorship, you really don't want to work for them. You'll work anywhere that'll get you an H-1B and a green card. And that's not true. You really want to work for this particular company, and you got to get that across. And then the third thing that I can tell you as a general proposition, the company sometimes wants to hear that you're willing to help them with the immigration process, that you take ownership of it. So if you say something innocuous about immigration and you start talking about immigration, you can say something like this, and they will love it. I know that hiring me involves some extra steps in the hiring process with immigration authorization. I'm willing to help you. I'm on your team to help you so that you can help me work here for the benefit of everybody. I take ownership of this process, and if you want me to be the liaison between the immigration attorney and your office, I will do it. I'm here to make this process go as smoothly and to make it as streamlined as possible. In short, The general background for this video is don't right off the bat start asking about, do you sponsor? Hello, my name is, can you sponsor? No. The second thing is don't talk about sponsorship too much. Avoid talking about immigration generally. Avoid talking too much about immigration. You don't want them to think that you only want to work there because of the immigration benefits. You want to convey that you work there because you love their company and you love the fact that your credentials and their company's mission are perfectly aligned and it's a perfect match. And then the last thing, if it comes up, take some ownership of the process. Yes, acknowledge that there's some immigration. It's not a big deal. Just, just get it across that the immigration process is not that big a deal and you're willing to take ownership and help them and do whatever they need you to do to make their job easier. Sometimes the interviewer on campus or the person in the human resources office, sometimes they know less about immigration than you think they do. Rule number one, don't talk too much. Don't talk too much. Don't talk too much about immigration rules. Why? Rule number two, because the person you're talking to might just know the words work authorization and they might not know what they mean. They might think everybody authorized to work is either a citizen or a green card holder. And if you go on and on and on about H-1B, OPT, blah, 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 it's not a job interview anymore. It's an oral report on immigration rules. Rule number three, what is your job during a job interview? The rule is your job is to get the job. How do you get the job? By talking about your credentials, your resume, why your resume and skill set are ideally suited for this employer, why you are so excited to work for this employer. If you talk too much about immigration, and that is not your job in a job interview is not to talk about immigration. Talking about immigration does not get you the job. It reminds the employer of all the complicated things they perceive in the immigration hiring process. Your job is not to talk about immigration. Your job is to talk about you, your credentials, and your strong desire to work for this company and make a difference, and tell them concretely how you think you could fit in with your skills and make a difference. Your job is to get the job. Rule number four, your job is to pass the buck regarding immigration questions. You should be polite and answer immigration questions in the interview to the extent that they are tiny. I learned this in Illinois. A very wise person from the career office there told me international students in a job interview should be answering tiny little immigration questions to be polite. Once those questions that are tiny become big, don't answer. Don't answer. Don't answer. So the question is, well, what do? You can't just say, I refuse to answer that. You pass the buck. If you're in an interview and your employment at the organization will be based on OPT and they have questions about OPT, direct them to your international student advisor. Maybe your school even has a pamphlet that describes what OPT is and that it's no big deal. You arrive on day one, ready to work. If the job questioning turns into what happens after OPT and you have to start talking about the H-1B. No, I know you're very eager and very earnest and you want to make a good impression. But the more you talk about what happens after OPT, forget it. It's no longer a job interview. So pass the buck to me. I'll help you. That's why I'm here. That's why I get up every single day. If I can help you get a job by sending you a personalized memo, and I've done this as of this date of this video, I've sent out about 650 of these memos, and we've gotten about 40 students from we don't sponsor, or we've never sponsored, we're afraid of sponsoring, we've never thought of that before, or we have a policy we don't sponsor. We've gotten 40 kids from an initial resistance to an actual H-1B employment with this memo. Now, is 40 out of 650 memos, is that a good success rate? No. Could it be better? Yes. So if you start working with us and you have a way to make my methodology more effective, tell me, please. My job is to get you the tools you need to get a job. How do you pass the buck? How do you answer only tiny little immigration questions? Well, here's an example. The interviewer might say, are you authorized to work in the United States? They always ask that. That's a popular one. Are you authorized to work in the United States? And you say, well, yes, I am. Hopefully they'll move on. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll say, oh, how are you authorized to work in the United States? If you say optional practical training, that's true. So you say, I have OPT. And then they might say, well, what's OPT? Well, that's a tiny question. What's OPT? You simply say that is something that lets me work for full time after I graduate. The school helps me do all the paperwork with immigration, and I show up on day one with a work authorization card, and I'm ready to go. And then if they ask you, well, what happens after OPT? Or if they ask you, how long is OPT good for? And then you tell them a year, and then they say, well, what happens after that year? Those are big immigration questions. That's what I speak about on campus. I could talk for 2 hours on what happens after OPT. Do not answer that question. Pass the buck. And here's what you say. Here's what you say. After OPT, I really don't know all the details, but we had a guest speaker on campus, me, and he prepared a memo as a courtesy to the school and to me, and it says it right in the memo. I'll give you a memo that's a standardized memo, but I personalize it with your name and your school. So when you're handing this memo to an employer in Kansas, and my information from Virginia is in the memo, it makes sense. There's a connection. Why is a guy from Virginia writing a memo to an employer in Kansas? Well, it's because I'm the guest speaker on campus. So I'm writing as a courtesy to your school and to you. And in the memo, I make it sound like it's no big deal to get an H-1B, and it's not. I explain the 4 big concerns and why they should not be concerns to an employer. If you want to know what's really worrying an employer, if you want to know what an employer's worried about, why they resist an H-1B sponsorship, send me an email. I'll send you a memo. Now you've got the memo. How do you use it? You go into the interview and you get the business card of the person interviewing you and you talk. If you feel like there's some resistance or some question about what happens after OPT and you feel like they need to have an answer, then you say, well, you know, I don't know all the details, but the guest speaker on campus here, he prepared this memo, and you hand them a paper copy, a hard copy of my memo. He's explained what happens after OPT for a typical popular work category called the H-1B. There are other work categories, but he's focusing in the memo on the H, just as an example. And he said he'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions free of charge. And I am. I really am. I want you to use that memo about what happens after OPT to get that question off your back and put it on my back. And you get to talk about why you deserve the job and why you're the best person for the job. And That's been effective. And then rule number 5, if an interviewer in America representing an American company asks you, a student from another country, to explain American immigration law to them, the American employer, does that make any sense, or should they feel some shame? Isn't it a shame? Seriously, seriously. And I really, again, I mean this. Isn't it a shame that an American employer is asking you, an international student from France, to explain American immigration law to them, the American employer? Does that make any sense at all? Shame on them. Shame on them. Don't answer those questions beyond being polite and answering the tiny little questions and balancing answering tiny questions about immigration with presenting your resume and showing them you're the best person for the job. You're here working hard in the United States of America, getting a good education, and if I can't help you make the job search go a little bit easier, make it a little more pleasant, take some anxiety out of the process, if I can't help you do that, shame on me. I understand, and I'm here to help.